Hey guys, this is Romano DeFranco here. I'd like to welcome one and all to another hockey video under the score Champs to Chumps. That's a series where we talk about how an NHL team rose to become champs and what led to their downfall in the years since then. Today, I would like to talk about the Windy City's third Stanley Cup in 6 years as we examine on how the 2015 Chicago Blackhawks went from champs to chumps. Let's discuss on how they became champions. This story all started back in 2010 when led by young first rounders like Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, and Brent Seabrook, second rounder Duncan Keith, and fourth round pick Nick Hjalmarsson, as well as free agents signing Marian Hossa and trade acquisition Patrick Sharp. The Chicago Blackhawks beat the Philadelphia Flyers in 6 games to clinch the 2010 Stanley Cup. That's right! After years of struggle since the dawn of the third millennium, and years of failing to get fans into seats, a pair of top 3 draft picks, some impressive scouting, and proper management by Stan Bowman as well as Coach Q Joe Quenneville had helped the Blackhawks win their first Stanley Cup championship in 49 years since 1961. Not only that, Chicago had also created a strong nucleus of young players who were and are still part of the franchise as a whole. After a 7-game first-round exit in 2011 and a 6-game first-round exit in 2012, the lockout-shortened 2012-2013 season saw the already powerful core of the Blackhawks roster joined by new long-term additions and former second-rounders like Corey Crawford, Brian Bickle, as well as the 5th-round pick in Andrew Shaw join the fray. Crawford in particular would have a huge impact on the Blackhawks moving forward as he earned the starting role for Chicago following the departures of Antti Niemi and Cristobal Huey following the team's 2010 Cup. This addition to the crease, along with the bolstering of their forward depth and physical presence to an already powerful group, resulted in the Chicago Blackhawks beating the Boston Bruins in 6 games in the 2013 Stanley Cup Final. It was their second Stanley Cup in the previous 4 years. With their new starting goalie of the future found, and with their defensive core solidified and their top 7 locked in, the Blackhawks were lifting the cup once more and showed no signs of slowing down. Following a tough 7-game loss in the 2014 Western Conference Finals against the Los Angeles Kings, and with the addition of former second-round pick Brandon Saad, as well as aging stars in Brad Richards, as well as Kimmo Timonen and draw specialist Antoine Vermette, the Blackhawks were locked and loaded for another long playoff run. Holy smokes, did they live up to expectations? The 2014-15 season saw the Blackhawks continue as perennial cup contenders as Toews and Kane led the team in scoring like they did several years before, despite posting lower stats though. Hossa, Keith, and Sharp still put up some impressive stats. Crawford stood tall in goal. Saad became a key contributor for the team, as well as Richards, Vermette, and Timonen providing some stability. These key pieces lived up to expectations once more, as they finished 3rd in their division and 4th in the Western Conference. This obviously meant that Chicago booked their place in the playoffs once again, as they look up to live up to their reputation as being the best hockey team in the world. The first 2 rounds of the 2015 Stanley Cup playoffs were nothing too difficult for the Blackhawks, as they disposed of the Nashville Predators in 6 games in the first round, as well as sweeping the Minnesota Wild in the second round in 4. In the conference finals, Chicago seemed to be vulnerable against the Anaheim Ducks. Even though Anaheim won the 5th game to put the Chicago Blackhawks at the risk of elimination, the team rallied back to win the final 2 games, including a Game 7, to narrowly advance to the Stanley Cup Finals again. Despite trailing 2-1 in the final round against the Tampa Bay Lightning, having displayed great showings from Kane, Toews, Hossa, Keith, Seabrook, Vermette, Timonen, and Richards, the Blackhawks were able to beat Tampa in 6 games en route to capturing the 2015 Stanley Cup. That's right, after years of no Stanley Cup before 2010, the Windy City had celebrated their 3rd Stanley Cup in 6 years, and as a result of that, Chicago was on top of the Hockey Summit as part of a modern-day dynasty. Alright, Now that we talked about how they became champs, let's now discuss how they became chumps. Because after all, there's an old saying, what goes up must come down. Even though the Chicago Blackhawks had just won yet another Stanley Cup, the cost of keeping their core together in the salary cap era was just far too great. As a matter of fact, several core players would go on to sign long-term lucrative contracts in their careers in order to retain their services and to help the team win more championships. However, the Blackhawks have been all too aware of their impending struggles to keep under the cap in the future. In order to reduce their cap struggles, several roster movements desperately needed to be made. For instance, backup goalie Antti Raanta signed with the New York Rangers. Up-and-coming winger Brendan Saad was traded to the Columbus Blue Jackets due to the two sides being unable to come up with a new contract, and fan favorite Patrick Sharp was traded to the Dallas Stars in order to free up his deal. Not only that, but the team also lost Brad Richards, Antoine Vermette, and Gianni Oduya to free agency. Last but not least, longtime defenseman Kimmo Timonen hung up his skates immediately after this Cup win. So less than a month later, the Blackhawks had just lost a reliable top 7 scorer, a new rising star in their top 7, their backup goalie, and several veteran players. Yeah, that's not the best way to show on how serious you are in terms of defending your title, but then again, it's part of the salary cap era. Let's face it, the NHL can be a strict business. On the bright side of that, Chicago brought an amazing Russian forward in Artemi Panarin, who won the Calder Memorial Award for Rookie of the Year. As a matter of fact, Panarin was the most important aspect on a team sending away legendaries and key roster players in a way to stay under the cap. Despite these hard off-season losses, the Blackhawks still finished third in their division as well as third in the Western Conference. Not only was Panarin part of Chicago's post-Cup success, but that was accompanied with Patrick Kane's 106-point campaign, coupled with the continued success from Taves, Keith, and Seabrook, as well as Artem and Nisivov. Sadly, though, the Chicago Blackhawks were not able to hold on to their title for another year, as they fell prey to the St. Louis Blues in 7 games in the first round. Having lost in the first round again, Stan Bowman felt like his team could still win championships due to the cup-winning team still intact, and made it clear that he would undergo changes to accommodate their goals. 1 month after their first round exit, the Blackhawks would trade away more key contributors in an effort to reduce more cap space. Fan favorite Bryant Bickle and Teuvo Teravainen were sent to the Carolina Hurricanes, whilst Andrew Shaw signed with the Montreal Canadiens. To make up for these losses, Chicago would bring in low-cost replacements either from their prospect pool, free agency, or trades. For instance, former Cup champion Brian Campbell as well as Nick Schmaltz, Ryan Hartman, and Richard Panik all joined the fray and became important assets to the team. These moves, coupled with the continued success of the usual assets, would help Chicago finish first place in their division and conference respectively. The celebrations would be short-lived, however, as they would lose in the first round to the Nashville Predators in 4. The following offseason would see 2 more assets to Chicago's championship in 2010, 13, and 15 leave the team. Nicholas Hjalmarsson, who was perhaps the most reliable defenseman for the team, was traded to the Arizona Coyotes in order to free up cap space, whilst Marian Hossa retired from hockey due to a rare skin condition. This continued breakup of the championship core and their disappointing few results prompted the franchise to part ways with Joe Quenneville a month into the 2018-19 season. He was then replaced by Jeremy Colleton. Even though they continued to try to replace their lost players with their prospect pool, keep free agency, and trades, coupled with the decade-old core of players continuing to get older and move past their prime, the Chicago Blackhawks have not seen their playoff goals come to fruition. They have now missed the playoffs in 7 of their last 10 years, finishing no higher than 6th in the Central Division. I feel like it's important to know that Chicago's inability to be a legitimate playoff contender after 2015 wasn't due to their game plan being outdated. That's my opinion anyway. Whereas the Pittsburgh Penguins, for example, have used their size and strength to win 3 Stanley Cups during the Evgeny Malkin Sidney Crosby era, but have imploded since then. That's because the league have moved more to a speed and skill style. Chicago had a bit of everything. Yeah, they had speed, size, and skill as well, but unfortunately, they just couldn't find the right piece to put around an existing core together. Stan Bowman's signature trade deadline acquisitions every year just could not find that one final puzzle piece to help get the team get over the hump. Let's think about it for a second. They went from being the best in the NHL on several occasions to being just as good as any playoff team to being a playoff hopeful. However, in an attempt to revive Chicago's championship window, Stan Bowman decided to bring back the players that won the Cup in 2015 back together again after stints elsewhere. This is similar to a band that gets back together after splitting up, only this time they're older and they're not as good as they were before. For instance, the likes of Johnny Oduya, Patrick Sharp, Brandon Saad, and Andrew Shaw have rejoined the Hawks and remain with the organization following stints elsewhere before retiring. Despite the need of getting the band back together, much of the 3-time Cup-winning core has remained intact on the roster 10 years ago since their previous Cup win. Of their 5 highest scores since the 14-15 season, 4 of them remain on the franchise 5 years after they won the Cup that year, and even going back to 2010. Of the 5 highest scores since that year, 3 of them were still on the team 10 years after they won the Cup. That goes to show on how strong a core the son of Scotty Bowman built for the organization that many of their primary players 10 years ago remain to be part of the franchise. Well, by the looks of it, the Blackhawks do seem to have realized that their cup-winning days with that core is done for, and now they're starting to embrace the idea of a multiple-year retool or even a rebuild. However, given some long contracts, it's going to be tough to reshape the roster anytime soon. For example, Taves and Kane took up $10.5 million until the 22-23 season, while Brett Seabrook and Duncan Keith took up $12 million until the 2023-24 season. That was $33 million locked up in 4 players, all of which have no movement clauses and were in their mid to late 30s. Taves and Kane to earn their great salary for the most part, but that's not the case for Seabrook and Keith, because they're really starting to show their age now. Yeah, they still continue to put up great results, sure, but their numbers are on the decline, and I was expecting these yearly cap hits to be tough on them, and they certainly were. Such as the cost of keeping a championship core together, that's for sure. On the plus side, due to Chicago's ability to draft very well over the decade, there are some pretty exciting new young faces going in this new direction. For instance, Connor Bedard is looking to break out as a young superstar, having won the Calder Memorial Award for Rookie of the Year. Kevin Korchinski and Frank Nazar are looking to earn full-time roster spots for the Hawks, and Artem Livshinov is looking to become a solid force on the blue line. With this next generation of Blackhawks players coming through this system, they're looking to become key players over the next few years. However, with the money locked up on their aging superstars for 10 years more, keeping these youngsters may be a challenge. But we'll have to wait and see what happens in each of the next few years. So, in conclusion, the Chicago Blackhawks won 3 Stanley Cups in 6 years because of their carefully crafted roster. Not only that, but their high draft picks live up to expectations, as well as their big trade and free agent acquisitions became primary assets for the team, and Coach Q Joe Quenneville was able to help them with their game plan, and he even helped utilize each player's skills. Unfortunately, as their star players signed their long lucrative deals of their careers, they continued to get older and move past their prime each year. This signified the starts of the upcoming prospects making the cut in the salary cap world. Regardless with the way things have gone for the team since their previous Stanley Cup title in 2015, you can't take away the fact that Chicago accomplished something magnificent. They won 3 Stanley Cups in the last 6 years and have been seen as a modern-day dynasty. Unfortunately, the direction in the way things are going now may be a hard pill to swallow after such success, but if any Chicago Blackhawks fan were to be asked about this, they'll tell you that there were some good and bad and ugly times, just like the good, the bad, and the ugly, but in the end, it was all worth it. And there you go. That's how the 2015 Chicago Blackhawks went from champs to chumps. What do you think about this becoming an under the score video? And is there another team you would like me to talk about? Do let me know in the comments down below. I would greatly appreciate your feedback as always. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.